Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives.
Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio, your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein.
The Dem shutdown of American security continues with the ridiculous long lines at airports. The Iran war rolls on with Trump claiming total victory, but Iran still shooting missiles at its neighbors. And business, for some unknown reason, Brendan Carr, head of the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, has signed off on the anti-consumer, anti-competitive Nexstar-Tegna merger. Let's take a closer look at these and other hot stories for week 13 of 2026. The Dem shutdown rolls on at this busy time with spring break and the start of the travel season. There has been a record lines at airports. TSA employees have not been paid for over a month. Many of them are calling out. I do not recall a time in America where travelers had to wait over 5 hours just to get through airport security, and the delay is for nothing. Again, ICE is separately funded, and ICE is protecting American people from murderers, rapists, and thieves. Never forget that. Further, the head of ICE has been fired, Kristi Noem, and the incoming head, Markwayne Mullin, is a very different leader. So as 2026 is an election year, it is time to vote against every Democrat for every slot from city council to U.S. Senate. Dems are proving that they value criminal illegals more than hardworking American taxpayers. Don't forget that. Hey, if you've enjoyed our content here on Saving America, like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Dr. Dave Saves America. The Iran war rolls on. How many times do I need to remind the administration that the trick is to underpromise and overdeliver? Trump keeps telling the world that Iran's military assets are destroyed, and then Iran shoots rockets at a U.S. military base 4,000 miles away. These whack terrorists are just shooting missiles at other Arab countries as well, not just the U.S. An important lesson for the world with those missiles that travel 4,000 miles is that Iran had more heavy-duty stuff than anyone imagined. So despite my personal resistance to endless wars in other countries, I do completely support exterminating the current Iranian regime. And Trump appears to have learned the lesson of Vietnam and Desert Storm. Don't stop until the other side is destroyed. The lesson was not learned, unfortunately, by past administrations, but maybe this business person, instead of a career politician, takes a little bit different view. Phased war gives the other side time to recover, so give it all of you got one time. I do believe that Pete Hegseth is the best Secretary of War in modern history. A recent statement of his certainly pleased me. We've decided to share the ocean with Iran. We've given them the bottom half. The United States has sunk more than 120 Islamic Republic ships So, facts are that Iran's Navy, Air Force, and air defenses are destroyed. Many military facilities are destroyed. And of course, the terrorists are harassing traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. That needs to be fixed, and now. I like the fact that after some hesitation, the rest of the Allied powers are ready to help in keeping the strait open. I'm not certain that the regime's military capabilities are fully destroyed. The recent missiles convey a message that they have some more stuff hidden. Keep bombing until they cry uncle. Nexstar Tegna merger, anti-consumer, anti-competitive. I rarely suggest changes in Trump's current lineup in D.C., but time to fire FCC Chair Brendan Carr. It was insane for him to even think about approving the merger of Nexstar and Tegna. Reports are that the deal would give Nexstar 260 television stations across 44 states, or about 80% reach across the U.S., and this was done without a full vote of the commission. The current law, passed in 2004, much more tightly limits ownership of TV stations to 39% national coverage. So I'm not sure why Carr approved this merger. The decision by the FCC and the DOJ, that's Department of Justice, resulted in a near immediate closing of the $6.2 billion deal by Nexstar. However, it ain't over yet. 8 state attorneys general have filed suit to block the merger on antitrust grounds. In addition, Newsmax, DirecTV, and other smaller networks have also filed suit to block the merger. Their argument is that smaller markets like rural areas will be hurt by the merger. The consensus seems to be that the cost will dramatically increase for providers, and of course that means for us consumers, due to this merger. Rough ride for the economy. The Fed inflation report was at 3.4% annualized, which is not good news for consumers. Worse yet, this number is before the Iran war and $100 barrel oil. No surprise, the March Fed meeting held interest rates at current levels. The Fed is trying to control inflation, so this new number is not a good one for those who want lower interest rates either. This, on top of rough jobs market, means the GOP has a big hill to climb to keep the House and the Senate in November. A quick end to the Iran war with a decisive win and flowing oil would do a lot to calm things down. Bogus identity theft awards. I'm assuming that many of you have received more than one notice that some institutions that you have shared your identity with have sent you a form telling you that you were hacked. The usual language is that they are not sure that they have fixed the problem, and likely you may or may not have been impacted. The standard offer is free credit monitoring for a year. I am now up to about 6 of these over the last 3 years. These services then send you useless notices that your credit balance went up or down, but provide little helpful information, knowing that some of your personal information on the black web is not exactly stunning or helpful, of course. I recently signed up for some medical tests, of course, each one at a different facility. Each one required full registration, including all my ID stuff. I did sit there and think about what kind of security do these operations really have? What is their liability other than these credit monitoring things? Well, there's always class actions, right? If you watch any TV, you may have reviewed a commercial or two regarding class actions for asbestos, certain drugs, and of course, Roundup. These all promise the world, and you don't have to pay any money. One of the financial institutions where I have an account was apparently hacked. I filled in some official paperwork about 18 months ago regarding a class action suit participation. I forgot about it. Then a couple days ago, I received a notice of a Zelle payment of $12.58. Yep, that massive sum. I think that might get me a hamburger combo at a fast food restaurant these days. That sure as daylight won't make up for my ID being compromised. I do wonder how much the attorneys who filed the class action got out of that deal. Amazon versus Walmart. Amazon recently passed Walmart as the largest employer in the United States in this battle of the behemoths of the retail world. The latest is that Amazon is introducing 1 and 3-hour delivery in some markets. Apparently, as many as 90,000 items could be included in these quick deliveries. Household items like toilet paper, for instance. It won't be free. Prime members will pay an extra $9.99 for 1-hour delivery and $4.99 for 3-hour delivery. Without Prime, it's $19.99 for 1 hour and $14.99 for 3-hour delivery. Of course, you could also pick up orders at most of your local supermarkets. Recently, as part of local Chamber of Commerce, I had the chance to tour Houston Amazon warehouse. All I can say, it is really amazing. The warehouse could hold 30 football fields. It had 10 million different products with a total of 35 million products in just that one warehouse. This place focused on smaller items. Other Amazon warehouses handle furniture and larger items. I liked the focus on safety throughout the facility. My favorite part was the advanced technology. Everything is coded from the inbound door to the outbound shipping. Robots manage the inventory. Seeing that alone is worth the visit. And yet 2,500 people also work at this facility, and that balloons to 4,500 people during the holidays. If you belong to a group that has the opportunity for a tour of a local Amazon warehouse like this, I strongly encourage you to check it out. Full disclosure, I do have a few shares of Amazon stock, and yes, I am also a longtime business member of Sam's Club, the warehouse operation of Walmart.
All rise.
Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I am sure that you will agree that they deserve the moniker of interesting persons. Saving America welcomes Ambassador Kip Tom and Royce Hood for a special panel discussion on a subject critical to the future of America. Ambassador Kip Tom is the chairman of the Tom Family Agribusinesses, president of SaraServe, and vice chairman of Farmers First and Rural Policy, American First Policy Institute. He has also been a board member of the Trump Agricultural Committee since 2015. Appointed by President Trump as ambassador to the United Nations Food and Agricultural Agencies, where he served in Rome from 2019 to 2021. He holds numerous corporate board positions. Royce Hood is a senior policy analyst at America First Policy Institute. He has a BS in political science with an economics minor from Texas A&M University. He interned at the Claremont Institute Center for the American Way of Life. He is the author of Ending the Federal Government's Reliance on Chinese Technology. We welcome Ambassador Kip Tom and Royce Hood for their first appearances on Saving America.
Pleasure to be with you.
Well, we're delighted to have you. And of course, we're going to focus on a specific part of the situation about Chinese infiltration into the U.S. market, specifically in agriculture. And as you know, we ask our guests 3 questions, and since there's 2 of you, each feel free to take a shot. But what are Americans not being told about the food security in the United States?
Well, I'll go ahead and start with that. You know, I think a lot of times we feel that we're a food secure nation, and the reality is we are not. I think if you go back in history, the last time our nation suffered from food insecurity would have been back during the Great Depression in the late 20s and the 30s. And from that point in time, we innovated, we worked our way through it, and we got to a point where now we were food secure, but then we've taken so much of our supply chains, whether it's on the input side of the products that we use that are pillars of producing crops and livestock proteins, to our output or some of the processing that goes on over to China. So I think we've always, in terms of trying to lower the cost of food, we've looked at other places around the world because of the regulatory environment in the United States. We've moved a lot of our supply chains offshore. And I say that mainly in the context as I look at crop chemistries. I look at crop care products that we use that protect our crops from insects, diseases, and weeds. Without them, our yields would fall 50, 60%. We'd have food price inflation, and we'd have global food insecurity. So we need these products, but a lot of these products are made in China. I think oftentimes I think back to what happens if we have a war between Taiwan and China. What happens to that supply chain? Yes, we have India. India has really stepped up and they continue to grow their sector to produce those same products. But right now, that one main pillar that we use to, whether it's animal vaccines or medications or what we try to use to care for our crops, would be at risk. And that puts the U.S. consumer in jeopardy if something like that would happen. So I'm a big believer in trying to onshore much of that back to the United States as we can. I believe we need to have those supply chains back here or with our allies. And so I'm here to tell you, we're not food secure. We may produce the raw commodities, but when it goes further down the stream or coming into those commodities, we have a problem.
And Royce, did you want to add something to that?
No, I agree with what everything Tom said. Just say that the historical problem, I would say, of the 21st century is that America has always underestimated the risk of offshoring, in particular to China. The geopolitical risk of things going to China has always been understood and undervalued. And I think as we've entered the 21st century, that much has become apparent, and so we're reckoning with those consequences.
Well, Ambassador Tom, you hit on an interesting side note, which I think is something that people have really not tuned into, and that was veterinary medicine and vaccinations, because obviously we need healthy livestock, but I didn't realize that we were dependent on other countries to provide that.
Well, what happens is we may develop the intellectual property here, but the manufacturing of that pharmaceutical product that's used to keep an animal healthy when they get sick, we've offshored it. And they came in producing it for less cost than what we could do it here in the United States. So a lot of major companies went over there and had the production done there. And I think could come back to us someday and really haunt us in the future. And I really encourage when I get in front of these companies that are producing these different vaccines, pharmaceutical products, those producing crop care products, those producing computer chips that run our tractors and run the computers on our farms and make us more efficient and protect the environment and help our workers get their work done, they're also produced there. And so this is where it's time for America to roll up their sleeves, figure out how we're going to invest the capital and how we're going to bring these supply chains back home.
Well, you touch on an interesting issue in terms of contract, developing the important intellectual property, the IP here, but then contracting out the construction or the manufacturing. And of course, one of the most vivid examples, which ended up in one of the largest lawsuits in history, was that Apple, of course, developed the smartphone, basically the iPhone, but they don't have a factory. They're building their first factory right now, and they went and had Samsung build the phones. And even though it's technically through Japan, it's actually, I think a lot of the manufacturing was actually done physically in China. And then a few years later, Samsung came out with its smartphone, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. They ripped off our IP, and of course it ended up in a big judgment. But Apple is still sharing that market with a large number of competitors, even though clearly they got out in front. So it is interesting, this issue of contract manufacturing turning into competition.
Well, it's interesting. You bring up the point on AI, and obviously Apple went over for specific reasons, obviously to reduce costs and everything. But when we think about the intellectual property that we generate here, this is what America has done so well for well over 100 years, better than most places around the globe. And when I look at the seed industry in the United States, that's one area where we've really increased productivity. So much so, I'll share this story with you. My father passed away about 4 years ago in February. And 4 days before he passed, he said, I'd like to go down to the farm one more time. We went down the farm and we visited where his cows were having baby calves and everything. And he said, well, let's go on down to the first field where you and I farmed it with together. And I remember that when I was like 5 years old, walking in the furrow behind my father with my dog, and as he plowed the field. And we sat there on a rock talking that day, and Dad made the comment. He said, "Well, what did this field yield this year?" And I said, "Well, before I answer that, I'm going to ask you, what did it yield when you were a boy following your father when he plowed his field with a horse or a mule and a plow?" And he said, "Back then we got about 30 bushels per acre." I said, "So to answer your question, today we get about 240 bushels per acre. So we've had an eightfold increase in productivity gains. A lot of that is due to seed genetics and agronomic knowledge that we've got." Well, that intellectual property is constantly being threatened in the United States here, being stolen by the Chinese. We had Chinese in our fields in northern Indiana, southern Michigan, across to Illinois, and into Iowa, actually out in the fields digging up the intellectual property, some of these male and female inbred lines to take back and produce in China. This is why we know that China someday will be self-sufficient within probably 5 years, we predict, self-sufficient in production of commodities like corn and soybeans. And that's because they stole our intellectual property. They were one of our largest customers in the world that we sold to in the export markets. Now, because they have our IP, they don't need us any longer. So play that across many other sectors, many other industries in the United States where they've stolen our IP. So all of a sudden, one of the world's second largest economy, all of a sudden doesn't need the United States.
Yes, and of course, I think many of our listeners are familiar with the fact that President Trump has had numerous discussions with China about honoring their commitment to buy American soybeans. But obviously, if they can fix their using our intellectual property, including genetic development of higher yielding crops of soybeans, they'll have less or no need to import soybeans from the United States.
Well, we have that going on. And then, not only did they steal our intellectual property, use it in China, but China's got a major foothold in one of the largest production areas of agriculture today, and that's Brazil. We've seen what they've done with the Belts and Road Initiative down there. They've brought a lot of foreign direct investment in, improve infrastructure, investing in farms, investing in actually doing barter trades now. They're building a rail line from the Mato Grosso area clear across into Peru to do deep water port loading of commodities to get them into China sooner. So they've taken and used what we had against us, and even with some of our biggest competitors, which is Brazil. So I can't say enough. We need to make sure that we do a better job of protecting our intellectual property and keep our guard up at all times.
Absolutely. And all that. Well, as you know, we try and keep these short so people will actually listen to the interview, and this has been great. How can our audience get more information about both of you and the important topic of CCP's involvement in the U.S. food chain?
Royce, I'll let you kick that off.
Good place to keep updated is our website, americafirstpolicy.com. Both our rural policy section, which deals with agriculture issues more generally, which Ambassador Tom is the co-chair. Let me get that correct, I think. And also our China policy initiative. My supervisor, Adam Savitt, is just returning from a 5-month stint at the USDA covering this exact issue. So expect more from us on a lot of China agriculture supply chain stuff. Both me and Adam can be found on Twitter. I know my handle are at r__hood. I don't remember Adam's off the top of my head though, so apologies to him if he's watching this.
I would say, as Royce commented there, where you need to get that relevant information. But I think I would ask people, everybody, we all have a responsibility here. You see something, say something, get in contact with somebody. I know in the last few weeks here, there's been a number of arrests at a number of universities around the country where we've had some Chinese infiltrating that could have caused some harm to the country, and they've been removed. And I hope we can continue to do that. I look forward to our law enforcement doing what they can to prevent any of these incidences from happening and becoming a bigger problem for our country. But again, as I said, you see something, say something to somebody. I know in Rome, in our embassy alone, it was hard for us to even have a conversation to discuss anything about China with, we know the surveillance that could go on around the embassy. So There's so many ways that they're very creative in trying to capture U.S. information that we all need to be involved. But the only way to be involved is make sure you're relevant and read up on what's going on. And it good starts with the policy papers that come out of AFPI.
Please proceed.
Trimming the Department of Education. Since his election, Trump has been pushing to eliminate the Department of Education. Despite being a professor, I do support this, as this is a failed operation created by a failed president, Jimmy Carter. The quality of education has gone down since it was created in the late 1970s. Certainly not an endorsement for continuing this waste of money. Congress would need to eliminate the department itself, but it can legally be trimmed by the president in the meantime. The latest is moving the massive $1.7 trillion federal student loan portfolio to the Department of Treasury. It should have been there all along, and I hope they do what the Ed Department has not done: dramatically reduce the high level of defaults on payments. Students who took the money have a legal and moral obligation to pay the money back. There have been a lot of compromises over the last 4 years, but it's time to pay up. Naturally, the whack left is up in arms. There's one so-called student advocacy group that claims the poor babies won't know how to get breaks. Hey, this is for studies in college and grad school. Students at that level who borrow that money should understand their responsibilities, including what payment or credit options are available. For instance, teaching in a public school to work off some of the debt. They should not need some lefties telling them how to follow the rules. Iranian regime is a terrorist operation. The terrorists who have been running around for the last 47 years are even worse than most Americans realize. The latest is the public hanging of 3 protesters against the regime. One of the 3 was a champion on Iran's national wrestling team, who is only 19 years old. Remember, this is a regime that financed the Hamas attack on innocent concertgoers in Israel on October 7th. Right, all you protesters who were crying when the IDF went after the cowardly Hamas, who were hid behind the Gazan people. This is real terror that needs to be protested around the world. ODU shooter, a student without a criminal records check. Yep, the ISIS-supporting terrorist who killed 1 and wounded 2 others at Norfolk's Virginia Old Dominion University ROTC program was allowed to become a student without a criminal records check. Why? Because the Dems in the Virginia legislature passed a law prohibiting criminal record checks for state and university applicants. Given the incredibly bad job the new governor is doing in Virginia, I doubt it will be fixed until the populace in that state recalls her and gets back on track. A reminder that the shooter pled guilty in 2016 to supporting ISIS and went to prison for 11, not the 20 years recommended by the prosecution. Failure of justice number 2 is letting him out of prison after only 8 years instead of the 11. Third, letting him on campus instead of deporting him after withdrawing his citizenship, as he was a naturalized citizen, formerly of Sierra Leone. This is yet another brutal reminder that America must do a better job of vetting immigrants seeking citizenship of this fine country. In response, some members of Congress have proposed a law that if a naturalized citizen is convicted of any type of crime related to terrorism within 10 years, they will automatically be deported. I strongly support that law. An illegal who had been deported from the U.S. 4 times and returned each time, along with 15 prior arrests, is accused of shoving 2 men onto subway tracks in New York City. Fortunately, the younger man pulled the 83-year-old vet off the tracks, although he was seriously injured. This is yet further evidence that ICE needs to continue to do its job, and the Dems in D.C. are on the wrong side of civilization itself. Remember, the damaging Dem shutdown is to protest ICE doing its job. How wrong can they be? If the GOP can get this message out consistently, it would help clarify the relative positions of the GOP and the Dems. This could help to balance the current negative financial news as we careen towards the November elections. Cancer deaths tied to colorectal cancer. I want all of us to live long and happy lives. A sad fact as the reports are that colorectal cancer is the leading cause of cancer deaths in people under 50 years old. Frankly, I found the report surprising due to the progress the world is making in detecting and curing various forms of cancer. I recall actress and former model Farrah Fawcett died of a form of this cancer at only 62, but apparently had symptoms at a much earlier point, but did not get them checked out. Doctors are encouraging the heavily promoted home fecal test at an earlier age. Yeah, I know it sounds unpleasant, but imagine if you are the one who gets an early diagnosis and effective treatment. Doctors in the specialty say these cancers are highly treatable at an early stage. If you have any of the risk factors such as obesity, physical inactivity, or a diet with lots of ultra-processed food, you may request an early colonoscopy. I have had two, and yeah, prep's a bit irritating, but in both cases, the actual test took less than an hour, was fully covered by insurance, and I was cleared both times.
Please raise your right hand.
As we grow up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we are in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities, and the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. F grade for governors of Maine and Wisconsin. The badges of dishonor today belong to two governors who will hopefully soon disappear from political office forever. We have more on number one, Maine Governor Janet Mills. During a recent governor's meeting in D.C. with Trump, she got in an argument with Trump about allowing boys and girls sports. Trump said Maine needs to comply with his executive order banning boys and girls sports. Mills said, "See you in court." Not wanting her to get the last word, Trump remarked that this was okay with him since time for Maine to have a better governor. Not to be outdone in the who can be dumber and more anti-American competition, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers spoke out against deportations of criminals here illegally. Previously, he vetoed a bill banning boys from girls' sports. Despite Evers' position, the Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association has just recently announced that it will comply with Trump's executive order preventing trans athletes from competing in girls' sports. So, Saving America awards today's F grades to Maine Governor Janet Mills and Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers for being out of touch with the American people.
Sustained.
Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. Alex Jones keeps Infowars as a judge rejects the Onion buyout. This is a case that just won't go away, folks. This is due to the high profile of Alex Jones, who does a show called Infowars. He is known as a conspiracy theorist, and specifically, he questioned on his program the Sandy Hook school shooting in 2012. The parents and survivors of the victims sued in both Connecticut and Texas, claiming damages due to his persistent claims. He eventually agreed that it was a real incident. However, he was already liable for awards of about $1.5 billion in the two states. Naturally, this is now in bankruptcy court. I think he's worth about 50 mil. Typical in bankruptcy court, assets of the defendant are sold to satisfy the judgment. In this case, Onion, the satirical news outlet, offered $1.75 million in cash and other incentives for Infowars assets in an auction. Now note, First United American Companies, which runs a website in Jones' name that sells nutritional supplements, bid $3.5 million, or about double. The Sandy Hook families, for some reason, supported the Onion bid. The bankruptcy judge held a two-day trial in December to determine if the sale would go through over Alex Jones's objections. The judge then ruled that he would not approve the sale. He expressed concerns about transparency in the auction. So Jones will keep Infowars for now. The Onion had planned to kick Jones out and relaunch Infowars in January as a parody site. Ben Collins, CEO of the Onion parent company, Global Tetrahedron, posted on social media, We are deeply disappointed in today's decision, but the Onion will continue to seek a resolution that helps the Sandy Hook families receive a positive outcome for the horror they endure. Interestingly, the judge found no wrongdoing with the auction process. However, he said he did not want another auction and left it up to the trustees who oversaw the auction to determine the next steps. So the case will continue. Watch for further reports.
Motion denied.
In a signal that there's a new sheriff in town, the 4-count federal lawsuit against Dr. Ethan Schein has been dismissed by the U.S. Justice Department. In 2024, Dr. Schein, now a surgeon in Dallas, was charged with obtaining information that transgender surgeries on minors were being performed at the Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, Texas. This is the nation's largest pediatric hospital. At the time, transgender care for minors was legal in Texas, but the hospital had announced in 2022 that it would stop transgender care. Effective with a law passed in 2023, it is now illegal in the state of Texas to provide transgender procedures to minors. The Texas Supreme Court recently upheld that law. This marks at least 25 states which ban such procedures. The accusation by the feds was that Dr. Schein obtained information on children who were not his patients and that he shared that information with a conservative activist with intent to cause malicious harm to the hospital. He pleaded not guilty to the 4 counts of wrongfully obtaining individually identifiable health information. This would be a violation of federal law from the 1990s called HIPAA that protects private health information. He faced up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine if convicted. Dr. Schein said following his arrest, "I have maintained from day one that I have done nothing wrong. We're going to fight this tooth and nail, stand up for whistleblowers everywhere." He consistently maintained that he never disclosed the prohibited individually identifiable information, that he merely disclosed that such procedures were being performed. The hospital declined to comment on the legal action against Dr. Schein, but has maintained that it complies with all applicable laws. The attorneys for Dr. Schein noted that the case has now been dismissed with prejudice, so that the case cannot be revived later against this whistleblower.
Objection, Your Honor.
Reports of universities making deals with the Trump administration. Amid well-reported attacks on Jewish students and DEI discriminatory policies, the Trump administration has gone after a series of universities. One of the highest profile is Columbia University, just reported as a $221 million settlement agreement with Columbia. Frankly, this sounds like greed to get back on the U.S. government gravy train and not a real change of heart. This remains to be seen, of course. Subsequently, there have been rumors that fellow Ivy Harvard is willing to settle for as much as $500 million, but that deal is not confirmed at all. On the heels of this, UCLA paid a $6 million settlement regarding a campus Jew exclusion zone that resulted in discrimination claims from students and faculty members. This is yet another sad example, but again, does this mean there has been a real change of heart? With focus on the high-profile Ivies in schools like UCLA, I note with interest reports that George Mason University in Northern Virginia, which is close to D.C., has been under investigation for race-based hiring policies. It apparently has already agreed to change practices, but the president who put this discriminatory nonsense in place, Gregory Washington, is still there. Having spent a lot of time in the D.C. area, I was interested to keep an eye on this school. In the meantime, speaking of university presidents and the state of Virginia, its jewel, the University of Virginia, had a sudden resignation of its president, Jim Ryan, just a short time ago. I'm not aware if there are any similar accusations or federal investigations that triggered this move. Reportedly, alumni and members of the board were upset at the woke direction UVA had taken over the last 5 to 10 years. In one report, I heard that UVA had a DEI director who was being paid more than any member of the faculty. As someone with 2 graduate degrees from UVA, I, for one, am happy to see Ryan leave. Let me keep the record straight. I want to see diversity and welcomeness across faculty, staff, and students of all American universities. What I do not want to see is illegal racial or other preferences that are not based on merit tied to individual contributions. And speaking as someone over age 50, it is time for all universities to stop discriminating on the basis of age. I have personally experienced it, which is ironic because my students enjoy the fact that I bring many years of business and law experience into my classrooms.
May I remind you, you're still under oath.
Saving America welcomes Kevin McDonald. Born and raised in Seattle, Kevin is a self-described, jovial, fun-loving man who has experienced life in a big way. He has been a star athlete, actor, restaurateur, sales and sales manager, transit operator, audio producer, talk show host, creative consultant, motivational leader, and podcast host. He is the creator and host of KM Media Pro. He produces and hosts engaging podcasts that cover a wide range of topics. I know him from his Positive Talk radio show, which is on multiple networks, including Brushwood Apple, where his mission is to create positive and uplifting podcasts that inspire and empower people to achieve their goals and dreams. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. We welcome Kevin McDonald for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you, sir. I love to be here. This is going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to it. As you know, we ask our guests 3 questions, and the first one is, tell our audience how you went from star athlete to producing and hosting podcasts. That sounds like a non sequitur.
Well, I was too short to go pro, but I enjoyed my time as an athlete and was a boxer for a period of time and all that kind of stuff. And then I went into the restaurant business and restaurant sales, and I may be the only chicken salesman you've ever met.
Tell me more about the chicken.
I worked for a company out of Siloam Springs, Arkansas. And we talked, and it was a vertically integrated chicken company. And I traveled the country and sold chicken products to large restaurants and TGI Fridays and Old Spaghetti Factory and a bunch of them. And but there was a point in time, David, when I thought to myself, why am I really here? What's my mission? There's got to be more to it than what I've been told. I had the house, had the dog, had the cat, had the wife, and had the kids. They're all gone now, but I really wanted to understand why I was really here. And one thing led to another, and I got back into radio, which I'd done in college years before. I love it. I just can't stop doing it. It's kind of like a bag of potato chips.
Now, I've got to sneak in here a little quick mini question. Okay, you listed the wife after the cat and the dog. Is that why she's no longer there?
Well, I had to bury all 3 of them in the backyard. No, I'm kidding. The FBI don't come see me, but no, she decided that there were greener pastures elsewhere.
Okay, well, we won't get too far down that trail. By the way, I have worked with a company in Houston as an attorney that took boxes of chicken and took the skin and the bones out of the parts, and then delivered smaller boxes to restaurants for immediate use.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so it was very interesting. I actually was in their production room, which was a refrigerated chamber where people stood in a line and did the work. They had an interesting problem. They put the skin and the bones in big 55-gallon drums, and they were picked up twice a week. One day, the truck picking up the waste dumped one of the barrels in the middle of the street. So the people did the logical thing. They went out, scooped up the waste, put it back in the bucket, put the bucket back in the waiting for the next pickup truck. And then they rinsed down the street because chicken stuff is slippery. It could cause a car accident. Do you know that the city filed a criminal complaint against them for washing the street?
You're
that
kidding.
they wash the chicken's waste into the gutter. So I do not do criminal law, so I had to refer them to another attorney to represent them. So they paid a $500 fine and kept on boogieing. And today that is, because it was here in the urban area of the historic Houston Heights, that is now a housing a high-end housing project. Chicken parts production has now been moved out to the woods somewhere.
Well, you know, somebody had way too much time on their hands.
Yeah, well, there was a neighbor who didn't like the fact that he had bought a house next to the chicken factory. And you know what? The chicken factory had been there since the 1920s.
He probably should have fired his real estate agent and got another one because they could have told him, you're going to have chicken parts next to you.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're going to try and keep this on track. Question number 2, in reviewing your main website, I came across Think Energy. Share with our audience how that differs from your other work and efforts.
In addition to, well, originally I started with a show called Spirit Talk, because we wanted to talk about energy and our bodies and our chakras and how that all works. And, you know, like, so I had psychic mediums on and psychics and energy workers and healers and stuff, because I was really interested in the energy that we all have that is part of who we really are. And so I had to divide that show up because I have a staff, and the people in my staff said, you can't do positive energy kind of stuff when you're doing positive talk kind of stuff. They're two different things. So I divided them up, but I still have a love for psychic mediums, and I talk to my dad, my mom all the time, and all that kind of stuff. They're both passed on and that kind of thing. So it's just something that kind of a hobby that I'm interested in.
Well, you may find it interesting that I also am have people in my life who clearly have some psychic visions. Mine personally tend to be about me and what's going to happen in the future and things like that. And sometimes people get very upset. I have some evangelical friends who get very upset, and I'm like, I'm not sure how someone perhaps having visions of the future or the past would in any way be a contradiction of a religious belief. But in any event, I don't get into big arguments with them. But the people that I know who are appear to have some psychic energy are God-fearing people. They're not satanic or anything, but it's very interesting area. And of course, unfortunately, they're running a special on one of the cable channels right now of Miss Cleo, the famed con artist. And unfortunately, that doesn't help anybody, you know, when you have people who are taking advantage of the situation.
That's a really good point, David, is that be careful, because there are people that are going to try and make money from you. And it's like, do you remember the movie Ghost?
Yes, certainly.
Goldberg character.
Yeah.
That she was pretended to be a psychic, but she was fake. So just be careful and get a referral and from somebody that's been with them before. It's like I've interviewed John Edward and several folks like that who are really, really, really talented. If we had more time, I'd tell you the story about John Edward, but I know we don't. So we're good.
All right. Well, speaking of time, let's pop to question number 3. Please share with our audience your approach to your Positive Talk Radio, which of course we have the headline behind you. How do you select your guests, and what's the point of the show?
Point of the show is primarily to answer the question that we all have at one point in our life. I know you're on your 3rd career now, and we all have a point in time where we say, why am I really here? What am I really here to do? I'm not here just to, you know, sell chicken in my case, or be a district sales manager or whatever. I'm here to affect the planet in a positive way, I think. And so in order for me to activate that, I started Positive Talk Radio way back in 2003 when, as you were talking about evangelicals, in those days, meditation was something that you didn't do. Yoga was something that you didn't do. Those are now mainstream activities. But over time, I fell back into broadcasting, and the purpose of the show is to show everybody by the interviews that we do that you can be more than you think you can be. You can be anything you want to be. And if you choose to write a book or create a song or to be a coach and to help other people, and regardless of what you're doing, if you're doing it for the right reasons, then you get to be on my show if you want to be.
Well, that sounds great. Have you had a particular guest recently who really stood out? Somebody has said, darn, that's a really interesting person.
Today, as a matter of fact, her name is Michelle Blood. She is a singer-songwriter from Australia, and she was in a near-fatal traffic accident.
Wow.
And she used affirmations, positive affirmations, to heal. And she spent the rest of her life working with people like Bob Proctor and Wayne Dyer and some of the greats of the New Thought movement to really help people recognize that they could be more than they think they can be. Because, we were born great, David. I'm going to get on my soapbox if you don't mind. We were all born great, every one of us. But we spend our lives being told by other people, hey, David, you ain't so great. You got a lot of problems. And so what we're trying to let people know is you are great. Own it, live it, love it, and take care of each other and be kind to one another. That's really the premise of the show.
I love the point about being kind to each other, because we certainly have a lack of just basic courtesy and kindness and all that. By the way, you are the first person to mention Wayne Dyer's name in ages, and I have a very interesting connection to him. When I went to work on my MBA, I went to the Virginia Darden School to do a full-time MBA. They introduced a class that was a new discipline. It was called organizational behavior, which is a very basic course in MBA programs today, but they were inventing it. They didn't have a textbook yet. So they had a book called I'm Okay, You're Okay, a bestseller by Wayne Dyer. And it's kind of interesting because I just find it interesting what we worked with in mid-1970s and what it has developed into with these big, long textbooks and all that. And frankly, I was perfectly fine with I'm okay, you're okay. And I like the upbeat approach and the application of it. So I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and just as an aside, I end every show with be kind to one another because each other's all we've got. And the whole premise of, and I forgot to mention, I was also a bus driver for 12 years. And when you're
I missed that in your bio.
It was getting too long. But when you're a bus driver and you get to talk to all kinds of people, I'd been in the corporate world, and like you, I've talked to people that are vice presidents and making, 6 figures and 7 figures and playing golf in hoity-toity golf courses and having $400 and $500 dinners. And then I ended my working career before I started the podcast by driving a bus where people couldn't afford $2 for bus fare.
Incredible.
I learned that we are all one, we are all together, and that we have individual life experiences, but we can be whatever we choose to be.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up this interview. Kevin, tell people how our audience can get more information about you.
If you want, well, you can talk to my ex-wife, and she'd have lots of things to say that might not necessarily be all that flattering, mind you. No, Kevin@kmmedia.pro. That's my personal email, and you can do that. You can also listen to the Brushwood Media Network. We're on at 5 p.m. Monday through Friday and at midnight Monday through Friday. And we have all kinds of interesting people. And you're going to be on that show one of these days fairly soon. And we've got something that may be coming up soon that we can't talk about yet, but we'll talk about it later, kind of thing.
Sounds like a winner to me.
The defense rests, Your Honor.
Social Security trustees report now say it will run out of money 3 quarters earlier than reported previously. This is not necessarily new news, but only that due to the incredible stupidity of a recent act to grant even more benefits out of that depleted SSA fund, it is now projected to run out earlier in the year 2033. Again, the big hit would be that every Social Security recipient would have a huge 1/3 reduction in benefits at that point. In my article in American Thinker in summer 2023, I called Social Security the world's largest Ponzi scheme. That is because both political parties in DC have spent the incoming Social Security withholding and did not set it up to gain interest and pay benefits like a private pension plan is required to do. One fix is to stick it to everyone still working. The numbers work like this. DC could raise the withholding by 3.65 percentage points from 12.4% to 16.05%. That would mean a $2,400 tax hike amounting to a total of $10,700 paid to Social Security each year for the average worker earning $66,600 per year. Note how regressive that would be. This would be devastating and certainly not appropriate. On the other hand, the U.S. government could cut its spending and pay back all the money it has stolen from SSA over the decades. That is why, despite the recent bad publicity, I still support DOGE, or at least the concept of it. It is time to cut, cut, and cut. Here are some of my proposals. An intelligent reduction in force, RIF, of at least 1/3 of all federal employees. This includes the military, not the sloppy RIF that Trump and Musk ran earlier this year, much of which is still in the courts. Number 2, total elimination of federal pensions. Less than 10% of the private sector has pensions. Time for the so-called servants to have the same as us, a savings plan. Cut wages and benefits to match the private sector. No more excessive vacations and holidays. Elimination of civil service job protections. The vast majority of the private sector in employment at will jobs. Why should the Fed employees have a different deal? Implement my proposed cut to this postal service dramatically in terms of delivery days and jack up the cost of bulk mail to where it belongs. Eliminate uncompetitive overnight delivery, which the USPS cannot do effectively. I believe with these steps, America would then be able to meet its obligations to Social Security, Medicare, and previously promised federal pensions. Write to your local representative or senator if you agree with the Dr. Dave plan to save America.
This session is adjourned.
Hey, if you've enjoyed our content here on Saving America, be sure to check out our new site on Patreon, and that is going to be Dr. Dave Saves America on Patreon. Be sure to check it out for additional content.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honored to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.